Xbox has a ton of new AAA franchises in development at very prominent developers like IO Interactive, and perhaps a new IP in the works over at the Coalition that may or may not be based on the Star Wars IP. There's a lot here to talk about, so let's get into it. What is going on, everybody? It's Randall419, the man with the million, back again with another video. I hope everyone's having an incredible day. If you guys can do me a huge favor, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and please hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Thank you guys for checking out the video. I think when you ask an Xbox fan what they really want from Xbox, it's one thing: games. New AAA franchises, and perhaps new IP from existing Xbox studios that have been working on single franchises for as long as they can remember. While it's always fun to take a look at the advancements that Team Xbox is making with backwards compatibility and FPS boost titles going from 30 to 60 or 60 to 120 frames, and talk about the latest games hitting Xbox Game Pass, at the end of the day, the thing that matters most is games. It's exclusives. And really, that's what this video is going to be about. New information regarding some big-time new franchises that Xbox is working on with prominent developers in the industry. I mean, we already know that Xbox will be putting out a lot of games toward the end of this year. We know Psychonauts 2 is coming. We know Microsoft Flight Simulator is going to hit. We know there's a chance that Forza Horizon 5 and Starfield will be launching this holiday alongside Halo Infinite. And then you get into 2022, Avowed, Hellblade 2, the list goes on and on. But this goes beyond just Xbox Game Studios and Bethesda, the 23 teams making exclusives for the Xbox ecosystem. We're talking about potentially Xbox making a Star Wars exclusive in the same vein of how Sony works with Marvel to make the incredible Spider-Man series. We're going to talk about that a little later on, and whether or not the Coalition could be making that game. But it definitely does seem like the Coalition is working on a brand new project that isn't Gears of War, and I know that's going to excite a lot of you. But first, I wanted to talk about the game that myself and Jez Corden have been teasing for over a month now. You may have heard us talk about it on the Xbox 2 podcast or seen some tweets from Jez Corden that referenced a typhoon emoji or a dragon emoji. And yes, they were references to two games that Xbox Global Publishing were working on. And while this video isn't about that typhoon emoji game, it is definitely about the dragon one, a game called Project Dragon that is in the works over at the Hitman studio, IO Interactive. And this is what Jez Corden has to say about it over at Windows Central. He says, recently, IO Interactive of Hitman fame spoke to GameIndustry.biz about spinning up a third team to support a new IP that was something different for the studio, and we may know a bit more about what it is. A few months ago, I received information that Microsoft and IO Interactive were in talks for a new fantasy RPG dubbed Project Dragon. While it's too early to share any sort of gameplay details, the final product may look wildly different than the initial pitch. What's on paper thus far sounds incredibly ambitious and represents a completely new direction for IO. On IO Interactive's website, various job listings are live for multiplayer positions in IO's Swedish studio. And indeed, we've heard that this Dragon project is a connected world RPG set in an entirely new universe. One of the job listings PDFs on IO's website specifically refers to the team being Dragon, adding credence to the information we've received. Previously, we discussed how Microsoft is working with several third-party partners as part of its Xbox Global Publishing effort, with the aim of bringing more exclusive high-quality games to the Xbox consoles, and indeed Xbox Game Pass. Microsoft's Q3 2021 quarterly earnings report detailed record revenue for their gaming efforts, specifically citing hardware sales and Xbox Game Pass subscriptions as key growth drivers. And while if you don't believe Jez Corden, over at Eurogamer, they say Eurogamer's sources have also heard word of this new project within IO Interactive, which is described as being AAA in scope, though still very early in development and years away. It's currently planned to feature a large medieval-esque world, and yes, winged beasts of the dragon variety. But IO Interactive has also been open about the fact that its third IP in development, which IO boss Hakan Abrick first spoke of earlier this month during the recent GI Live online keynote speech, quote, without going into too much detail, we have a third universe that we're working actively on, which is a bit different and absolutely a love child. It is something our core people, our veteran staff, have been dreaming about for some time. Quote, "This is something that's in motion, and it's very likely that IO will be publishing not only our own games, but other people's games in the future as well. It was just a handful of years ago where this was unthinkable, where it was more just a few big publishers. Things are changing. That still works. I think the big publishers have a role to play going forward. I'll be open and say it's very likely IO will have one of our games published by someone else. That's very possible." So we have Jez Corden talking about this new game, a new AAA experience from IO Interactive. Eurogamers heard the same thing, and of course Jeff Grubb, in his recent appearance on Iron Lord's podcast, said he knows about the game as well. It's supposed to be a Diablo-style, camera pulled back out, but obviously the big thing to mention about it is that it's years away from actually coming out, probably 4 or 5 years from release, and probably 2 from actually being revealed to the world if it doesn't actually get canceled before then. I mean, we have the Hitman boss talking about how their new IP, a dream game that their senior staff have been thinking about for some time, how that game would be completely different than things they've made before. And yeah, a fantasy RPG from the makers of Hitman would certainly fit that bill. And then he mentions and says it's very likely that IO will have one of their next games published by somebody else, and clearly that is Xbox. And even though you guys might be disappointed that this game is years away, I think it's still very important Xbox is thinking of the future, because we don't want a repeat of the Xbox One generation. And I'm gonna explain what I mean. The Xbox One generation had a decent amount of games in 2013, 2014, 2015, and 2016, but something happened where Xbox stopped investing in games and studios, because we basically got nothing in 2017 and we got nothing in 2019. And if you look at what Xbox is doing right now, we know we're going to have games at the end of this year. We know there's going to be games in 2022 and 2023 and 2024, but we don't know what's happening in 2025 or 2026. Here we have a game that is basically 4 or 5 years away, so Xbox is already thinking about games they need 4 to 5 years from now, which is in stark contrast to what happened with the Xbox One, where you only had Halo Wars 2 and Super Lucky's Tale in 2017, and really only Crackdown 3 and Gears 5 in 2019. Xbox needs to avoid that lack of software drought, and partnering with IO Interactive via Xbox Global Publishing is a way around that. So let me know in the comments below if you're excited for a new fantasy RPG franchise from IO Interactive published by Xbox. Now this next story is super exciting to me. I think a lot of you are going to be excited by it, although there might be a small percentage of you that don't like this news of potentially the Coalition working on a new IP. That has me super excited, because I want to see what the Coalition can do when they're not constrained by the gameplay mechanics and ideals of the Gears of War franchise. And you know what? My wish might actually come true, because we have some information here from Jeff Grubb, who states that not only is the Coalition still working on Gears 6, but they also are working on a new IP, and it actually might be Star Wars related. Pretty crazy, huh? So it says, since before it was even called the Coalition, the Xbox studio has been focused exclusively on Gears of War, and even when they branched out and made something other than a cover-based third-person shooter, they've done it within the confines of the franchise, like they did in partnership with Splash Damage on Gears Tactics. And it makes sense, of course. Hell, they're named after the franchise, but it seems they might now be ready to do something new. VentureBeat journalist Jeff Grubb recently uploaded a video, and as spotted over at Reset Era while speaking about the Coalition, he dropped potential details on things that might be in the works at the studio. It's been previously confirmed that the Coalition is providing development support to 343 Industries for the upcoming Halo Infinite. In addition to that, Grubb says they're also working on Gears 6. This one shouldn't be surprising, especially since recent job listings have suggested the same, though Grubb recently said that we're unlikely to see the game at E3 this year. What's most interesting, however, is that according to Grubb, the Coalition is also currently working on a third project, which, according to him, is likely a new IP. Grubb says that he's heard rumors it could be a Star Wars game, but hasn't been able to confirm that information, while he's also unsure if this game will launch before or after the next Gears. Now this puts a smile on my face, because even though I like Gears of War, I think it's time for that series to take a break. I want the Coalition to work on something new, whether it's third person or first person, and if they're out there making a new IP, a new franchise for Xbox, well, that's all the better to me. And the whole idea that maybe it's also could be a Star Wars game is really intriguing. What if the Coalition was working on The Mandalorian in partnership with Lucasfilm? Now that would be pretty damn dope. So Jeff Grubb talked about how this project could be a new IP or might be related to Star Wars, but he also talks about how Microsoft might actually have made a deal with Lucasfilm for an exclusive Star Wars game. We've talked about that in a recent video where the information came to us from the Defining Duke podcast and Mr. Matty Plays, where he said he knows of an Xbox developer working on a Star Wars game. Jeff Grubb says, what I've heard is Lucasfilm's games, they're making a lot of deals for Star Wars games. They are putting a lot of stuff into action. That means stuff with EA, but I do believe they're trying to make partnerships across the industry. There have been rumors of companies like Microsoft trying to get a Star Wars game. Maybe The Mandalorian. I don't know if that's at Microsoft. The thing I know for sure is that Lucasfilm has a lot of Star Wars games in the works. So either the Coalition is working on a new IP, or it's a Star Wars game, or there's a completely different studio at Xbox that might be working on a Star Wars game. So we have a brand new fantasy RPG from IO Interactive. We have the Coalition helping with 343 to get Halo Infinite out the door, but also still working on Gear 6 and a new IP that might be Star Wars related, and or a studio over at Xbox also working on a Star Wars game. The future is going to be great, guys. There's going to be tons of games to play, and I can't wait to see the roadmap revealed at this year's E3, which is basically a month away. Anyways, guys, that's the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Hit that notification bell if you always want to be notified immediately whenever I drop a new video like this. Please share this out on social media or tell a friend about the channel. And if you want to take your support even further, you can always hit that join button where you will get access to channel badges and emotes for the podcast we do every single week with Jez Corden from Windows Central. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Later, guys.